Good morning and welcome into another edition of Mic'd Up here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, Pittsburgh Sports Now, and all throughout the Now family of networks. Training camp still in the air and training camp about to transition to Canton, Ohio for a big weekend to induct several Steelers greats, a 2-year worth of class based on last year being derailed thanks to the pandemic. And we will get to all of that and our thoughts on Steelers training camp to this point, our early observations, and how this team is looking because a certain part of this team is looking really, really good. But will that lead to some drama, some conversation? What's kind of the difference? And maybe what's going on the other side of the football? Because that side's not looked as good. And maybe some thought it would have been the reverse. Certainly that side is filled with a little bit more veterans, but also having some issues. That's offense. The defense I'm obviously talking about. And we're also going to talk about some news trickling from the weekend. Justin Champagnie, Pitt product, getting a chance in the NBA, signing with Toronto after the NBA draft. Can also mention, of course, Miles McBride from WVU end up being drafted by the New York Knicks in the second round. So he didn't get that first round pick that he thought he would get and was told after leaving WVU, but still will get a chance with New York. Unfortunately, not as much of a guarantee as the first round would be. I'm Mike Osti, and that's Mike Vakovacan. Joining me as always, Mic'd Up is presented by Martin Lawn Services, where you can contact Doug Martin at 412-849-5894. And Mike, we're going to start with Steelers training camp. It's been going on a while now. I was down there in person. It's going to be delayed and stopped a little bit with this Canton, Ohio celebration of former Steelers, and also before that, the Hall of Fame game. Steelers will take on the Dallas Cowboys this Thursday night. It's a preseason game, but still a big deal with those franchises and those players being inducted and coaches, of course, coming up. But before we get to all of that, because all that coverage will be at Steelers Now, I'll be there in person. What have you noticed from training camp to this point? What are your takeaways to this point that maybe is a surprise to you or maybe just a big deal to you? And positive and negative, of course.
Normally I'm a type of guy that is ready for the NFL season.
Yeah.
Normally training camp bores the hell out of me. And I just want to see the ball kicked off on September or whatever it is.
Right.
I'm actually into training camp this year. I really am.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by I think it's the weapons and the Matt Canada factor. I really think he's going to be a big deal for the Steelers in that I just think it's going to be something fresh. I think over the last few years, the Steelers offense, I think, despite having skilled personnel, I think it got stale. And I think Canada is going to bring some new life, a new way of doing things, maybe a more modern way of doing things. And I think he's going to maybe use the personnel that they have on this team more effectively. A couple things that I've noticed is number one, this hasn't been done in, I don't know, can't even tell you the last time, but notice Derek Watt is actually being used. He signed here as a free agent.
Right.
And they're actually using him, for what I'm reading and seeing, not as a featured back or anything, but he's actually being used as a player and somebody that, has to be accounted for, which I think is new. And I also like the two-back set that he's using with Anthony McFarland and first-round pick Najee Harris. I think when you have two guys like that in the backfield that are both capable of hitting a big play, I think that makes you're going to have, as a defensive coordinator, you're really going to have to account for things. Yeah. And I don't know. I'm just very excited about where this offense is going. And as I said a while ago, I think the Steelers are going to be a lot better than a lot of people in the local and national media are believing they'll be.
Yeah, and they're being picked right now to be 12th, I believe, by most national outlets. Some are saying 7-10. Some are saying really 10-7 at the best, maybe 11 wins for some if they're really getting optimistic. Could be somewhere in there. I could see them not winning the division, but I certainly think they're going to be a playoff team, and maybe I could see them winning the division. It depends on how things fall. This is a tougher schedule than last year, so even with them being better, it is very possible, and this will take somebody really watching these games closely. If you recall, Mike, they started off 11-0 last year, But I was saying on the post-game show, and many others were saying, they're really not impressing me that much. They're winning these games, but they're kind of getting lucky. They're not showing that much. Ben is not having to do that much, so there was still a concern about later on in the season. And then all of those concerns came to fruition, and of course, they lost a lot at the end. Those last 5 weeks were rough, and then we know what happened in the postseason. So I think they are better suited coaching-wise to be better than last year. I think they are a little bit younger in some weaponry positions. That's all good. It's still a lot on Ben. Should be better, but also dealing with a new system. We haven't seen tons of him in camp because he has sat out a couple days, and we haven't necessarily got to see the full new wrinkles and how he's getting it. That's still maybe a question mark, but I do think that at least beginning of the year, he's going to at least not make the mistakes from a few years ago, and he doesn't need to go crazy. So as long as Ben can realize that it doesn't need to be 70 passes a game, and maybe he doesn't have to have 4,000 passing yards and 30 TDs, if that's all okay with him, then I think they're okay if he can kind of be more of a game manager. But with that all said, they're playing a tougher schedule, so they could actually be playing better and still lose some games. So I'm still tempted to go, 500, one above, maybe in that territory, one below, in that vein. But I also have liked the offense. I don't think anyone's could watch this team so far and say the offense hasn't impressed you. I'm also surprised by seeing Anthony McFarland get so much time. He came out of the draft last year. Many thought, I talked to somebody actually at the Washington Times who covered him at Maryland, that said his burst was incredible. He's not a number one back, doesn't have that size and ability, but could really be a nice piece, could be used right, could really be a great weapon for you. And maybe that'll finally be how they'll use him. However, Mike Tomlin for years and years and years has always told us that he likes that bell cow. So maybe he's gone away from what he normally likes to do. It does not appear like they're doing a bell cow like they did with Bell and company, or even James Conner when healthy. It appears that they're going to have Najee be the number one. He's going to get the touches. He's going to also be used as a receiver, which he certainly loves and he certainly can do. But they're going to go to McFarland too, and maybe Najee doesn't get 450 carries. Maybe it's more 390, also with some receptions, and they kind of have a second back to sprinkle in, which – that would be great for the long term if they're ever going to, for 2-3 years down the line with Najee, who will still be here for 4 years, or if they're going to hope to resign him after that. So that maybe will keep him not having to get destroyed like a lot of other elite running backs 4 years in. They're basically done because of all the carries. And then the receivers, Deontay Johnson for me has been that bright spot. I said it on Twitter yesterday. Maybe it's a controversial take, but to me, Deontay Johnson is the only Steeler receiver that has number one potential. Chase Claypool is a beast, but to me, Deontay Johnson can get separation so easily. He's so quick to get that separation off the line, better than even Claypool at doing it. He's great after the catch. If he can, he's so explosive, but if he can work on his hands, and I have seen that so far in camp, if he can fine-tune his hands and not have as many drops, he has that ability to be the number one. And then we have to make sure that there's no drama that erupts with that. Clearly fits Juju as the number 3 in a big contract year, wanting his money. He may not love that. But if everything works in sync, I think the offense will be fine. The question I have for you, though, which has been the concern, they've lost some 7-on-7s. They haven't been as impressive. Yes, Highsmith has looked good at times, but Cam Hayward has voiced some concern when he's talking to us in the media about the defense, about needing to clean up some things. Even with Bush being healthy, any concerns for you from what you're seeing from the defense? Because they've not looked as good in camp, even though maybe some veterans that they have don't utilize camp as much to get going.
No, I don't worry about the Steelers defense. I think they have, I think we're 2 weeks in, we're a week in, if they're still doing this, week 2 of the season, then I'm going to be concerned, but they have everybody back.
Right.
Buddy Johnson is a guy at linebacker. I think that might have a role. He could be a late round contributor for the Steelers. A guy that when they drafted him, I don't know how much, but he's a guy that's showing up. Alex, I just think they have enough personnel there when it's time to turn on the lights. And as Mike Tomlin says, play in the stadiums or whatever his term is, they'll get it together. I just think it's the offense, and if the offensive line, I think it's the same thing. It's funny.
Yeah.
The success, I think, for both the two football teams in town, Pitt and the Pittsburgh Steelers, is all going to be predicated on offensive line. It's kind of
makes sense. That's so
it's very ironic at how similar those two teams are, both Pitt and the Steelers. They're built the same way. I think they have really good defenses. They have skill position people.
Right.
Steelers have better running backs than Pitt does, but it's all going to come down to if the offensive line is able to keep the quarterback clean, open the holes for the running backs.
They both have a veteran quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. It's very, very, very similar teams this year. The teams that could have success, but it's going to come down to one thing, and I think both teams are going to be really, really good this year. The other thing, somebody brought this up. John Banaszak brought this up. Wonder what you thought on the. He brought this up on the Fan yesterday, Mike. Your take on this? He believes with the new offense and everything that he believes that Ben Roethlisberger for a couple games this year or in the preseason should play into the second half to get familiar with everything, his personnel, everything. Right. He thinks it's very important for Ben to do that aside, which is clearly different than what teams do, play him a couple series and take him out. You buy into that?
I buy into that it would be good. I certainly think Ben playing a little bit longer in the preseason, maybe even playing a little bit more in camp and taking more reps in camp than in most years would be good, because one thing you've heard from quarterbacks, even Tom Brady this past year, despite all his weapons having to adjust, he's even said this, that it does take some time to learn a new system that's different. And Matt Canada's system is light years different than what Ben had in the past. This is a different, I think people need to understand this too. For Ben to go from what he had to Matt Canada's offensive style is more difficult than what Brady's had to do, than what Favre had to do when he went to Minnesota, than what many quarterbacks throughout history have had to do when they've went, than Peyton Manning from the Colts to Denver. And some have had success in that second or third go with a new system. But this is really a different system. It is a more modern system. It's taken from college. We saw sprinkles of it last year, but not enough of it. And now we get to see the full thing. So I think that would be a positive thing. I will say I can't see that happening. Based on what we've seen from camp, Ben is not hurt. Ben is taking routine days off. That's what veterans do. They are treating Ben like they treat Cam Hayward, like any other veteran quarterback, like he was treated last year, like the year before. Yes, he's willing to take the pay cut, but he also had to do it to come back. It appears that part of that meeting was also discussed where Ben made it clear, hey, I'm a Hall of Famer. I need to be treated like one. I don't know, unless he's willing to do so, which would be a positive, that he is going to want to play too much in preseason, unless they're really struggling in the first half. If he doesn't appear to have it in sync, because I think one key here, and many have said this too, I don't think you can judge how Ben is going to handle this offense in camp unless you see it in games. You're going to have to see it in games, and maybe you're going to have to see it a little bit longer in games or see it more against the first team in games. So it depends how long the opposing first team defense is there. It depends on how long he wants to play, but I think it would be good. And honestly, even if he's playing against the second team defense, but he stays in there, maybe it would be good for him to have some success and see, hey, I know this play. I got this rhythm. I don't care what the defense is behind me. You just need to get that confidence and rhythm going with those players. But he's the Hall of Famer. He's the veteran, but he still is the question mark because he's the quarterback and it's a new offensive system. So I don't think Najee Harris, I don't think Claypool, even Juju, Freiermuth has been a beast. He's catching everything like he did at Penn State. I don't think even Deontay Johnson, as long as he works on his hands and doesn't drop it as often, need to worry about playing long into regular season or preseason games before the regular season. But that would be great for Ben to do it. And if Ben does it, then they should do it. But I don't know if Ben's going to want to do that. Maybe one game. Maybe he'll do it for the Hall of Fame game. Maybe not yet there. I don't know. Probably not that one. No. But I don't see that happening. I think that would be a positive, but I just don't see that happening.
Well, regardless, everyone that'll be in quarterback, aside from maybe Josh Dobbs, I'll be interested in seeing.
Right.
Dwayne Haskins, he's the guy that'll be catch all the attention. I guess he speaks to the media today, so we'll see what he has to say.
Right.
But I'm really curious to see what he has to do. I know people are getting excited about camp, and camp is camp. Let's see what he does when there's a different color jersey on the opposite side of the field. But I tell you what, that would be a potentially huge for the Steelers' future if he is somehow able to get comfortable and possibly live up to his potential, and that could change, potentially change the direction of the Steelers. Instead of having to focus on a quarterback and everything else, they would have a guy on the roster under the wings of Ben here, and ready to jump in. So it's gonna be curious. I don't know that they're going to keep both Rudolph and Haskins, so we'll see what happens.
No, and I told you, I told everyone, I always thought that as much as Haskins had more talent, that Rudolph had proven more to the Steelers, that they actually thought he improved last year, that they liked him. He's the only Steeler, including Ben, who is signed after next season finishes and would still have a contract. They just gave that to him a few months ago. But what we're seeing from Haskins, I can tell you, Mike, he's looked really, really good. He's looked better than I thought he would even look right away. You're not hearing any peeps of what he's doing off the field. It seems like he's on the field only. He's playing really, really well. And unfortunately, Mason Rudolph has not looked good. Mason Rudolph has looked like he looked 3 years ago. He's not looking like anyone who's a first-string quarterback. He's looking like he's a quality backup. And honestly, in camp this year, he's looking a little worse than a quality backup. He's looking a little worse than he did last year. I'm not to say he's going to regress. Again, as you mentioned, this is camp. It's what we're talking about a few weeks. But interesting on Saturday, which is usually a big day for these drills, the 7-on-7 drills, the 2-minute drills, Ben took the first reps. Haskins took the second. Mason stood in the sideline and kind of watched them. That was shocking to Nick and I there because Rudolph had always been that guy taking the second. Tomlin didn't even get a chance to answer anything because he kind of was a little, I don't know what he was upset about, but he wasn't that friendly, and he kind of cut it off before we could ask anything. And then you see what's going on around the league. This also might be a problem. Maybe it'll even be a blessing in disguise for Mason in a way if he wants to play. But Carson Wentz probably out for the first half of the season. Several other quarterbacks going to be missing some time. Maybe they're going to bring in Nick Foles again, and he'll probably secretly hate Nick Foles in his personal life if that happens again. But if that doesn't occur, maybe they bring in Mason and say, hey, Mason could win us 8 games, 9 games. He did it for the Steelers when they had less weapons. We have hope this year. We'll bring him in. He'll do it, and then we'll have Carson come back at the end of the season or next year or whatever. That might give Mason might even like it because he get a chance to start the season. So maybe his chance is elsewhere. But, yeah, low risk, high reward. They didn't give up much. There's hardly much money tied in. Obviously, if Haskins ends up being the guy and Ben retires, eventually he's going to want more money. But he has no leverage now. He's played well. So they would really luck into something, which I think was the idea. And then that would totally fix the draft next year where the first pick would not have to be quarterback. But right now, no matter what, if Ben would retire, it would have to be quarterback. So we will see. That is shocking. I never thought at any other time in my life that Rudolph would not be on this roster, at least at the end of preseason, because of his experience. But I could definitely see that happening right now because Haskins probably has shown them enough to at least come in there and mop up duty at the least as the second, but he still would have less of a quality start resume than Rudolph's been, so maybe that'll give him some concern. Who knows? To switch gears here, though, on Mic'd Up, of course, again, presented by Martin Lawn Services, and you can contact them at 412-849-5894. Justin Champagnie left Pitt. He was that star that many thought would or hoped would be that bridge to this next era. He is gone now from the Pitt program, a star that emerged last year, parts of last year. Many thought even ACC Player of the Year. Obviously, that didn't materialize. He did regress a little. The team certainly didn't play as well down the stretch, but he has tons of potential. He is right now getting a shot with the Toronto Raptors. He didn't see that be a benefit during the draft, though, as he didn't end up being selected there, unlike, say, as I mentioned, Miles McBride out of WVU. What are your thoughts on Justin Champagnie's chances to have a quality NBA career, what he needs to do right now, what it may do, the situation with Toronto, that opportunity, how does that work as a fit for him maybe?
Well, I know the narrative since he's gotten drafted. We've read about it plenty of times from our readers on Pittsburgh Sports Now, is that he made a mistake by entering the draft. I don't look at leaving Pitt and entering the draft. I don't look at it like that. My thought is that Justin Champagnie, even if he would have come back next season and won ACC Player of the Year, Justin Champagnie does not have the skill set to be a first-round NBA draft pick.
Right.
Wasn't going to happen. His highest potential was going to be as a second-round pick. He didn't get picked in the second round. I don't think that's a big deal because eventually you need to prove that you can play. A second-round pick doesn't guarantee you sticking on an NBA roster.
No, that's what I said about McBride. That's why everyone's celebrating. That's a little bit of a negative. He should have been a first. He got second. Nothing's guaranteed in the second round, unlike the first round.
Yeah, and with Champagnie, he needs to prove it, and I think he will. All you need is an opportunity, and if he proves himself, he'll have an NBA career. TJ McConnell, perfect example. TJ McConnell wasn't a draft pick. He had to work his ass off, and he's done that the last few years. And yesterday he cashed in.
He's getting paid.
$35 million contract with the Indiana Pacers. He wasn't a draft. He went in there. He's a tough kid. I think Justin Champagnie's a tough kid. I think Justin Champagnie has some qualities that he could possibly stick around for an NBA team. And as far as the team he went to, I think Toronto over the last few years has proven to be a good team, a team that has developed some players that necessarily weren't household names when they got there. Right. And one of the reasons they went on to win to get to the NBA championship. I think that's a good fit for him, but in the end, it doesn't come down to rounds or anything like that. Is Justin Champagnie good enough to play in the NBA? He'll get that opportunity to show that with Toronto. And if he does, then he'll have a long career. And so I think a lot of that was overblown, but all the best to him. I have no doubt that he's going to he'll impress some people up there. And, they've gotten rid of some people yesterday. Kyle Lowry left.
I was going to mention that. Yeah.
Yeah. They're sort of in a rebuild mode right now. I don't know, rebuild, but they're not where they were a few years ago when they were contending for the NBA championship. So I think that's as good a fit as any for Champagnie to show what he can do. And, for his sake, I hope he does it.
Yeah. And of course, when you sign after not being drafted, we say he's getting an opportunity right now at Toronto, but this easily in 2 weeks could change to another team. You're not necessarily as locked in with the one club, so who knows? But I think Toronto does make sense, as you mentioned. They're in a bit of a situation where they're not going to win the NBA title this year. Maybe they'll squeak in the playoffs because the bottom of the East isn't as tough as the top. But Kyle Lowry being gone, there's no real star there. They're not filled up on the roster spots. I actually can say they probably are rebuilding, and he then would get an opportunity there. There's no one that's already there that position doesn't work. That doesn't work. That's already filled for the next 10 years.
Right.
They don't have that guy. So there is room to get in that roster. I would imagine he's going to get time if he's still on the Raptors to impress during summer league or whatever the case may be, if they do something like that, because obviously we're late in the summer. But if there's some type of G League or some type of minor league season before the NBA, we've seen Lonzo Ball and others have success there, and that helped them onward. That would be good for him. But even if not, I think it's a good spot because of the rebuild. I think he could be somebody that can give you shots and certainly can hit outside shots for you, whether it be off the bench or maybe down the line if he can manage to start for, say, a bad team. I think the difference you're going to see from him in the NBA versus Pitt, he's not going to be able to be as much a rebounding phenomenon. I don't see him being a double-double or triple-double machine like he was at Pitt because his size doesn't call for that right now. He might get beat up if he tries to get those rebounds. And also, Mike, unless you're Russell Westbrook in the NBA, a lot of the big body players would probably not love Champagnie running like crazy and stealing the rebound because they're going to say, I need those boards to get my money. You hit the shot, I get the rebound. Unless you're Russell Westbrook putting up triple doubles, historic clips, and I don't know how that's going to work with LeBron, but that's a whole nother show.
Yeah.
You can't get the rebound. So he's going to have to know his role a little bit, pull back a little bit. But if his bread and butter is going to have to be hitting outside shots. If he cannot hit outside shots, it'll be a problem. If he can, he'll have a spot in the NBA. TJ McConnell, a perfect example. He's made a great career for himself, to say the least. And not everyone's Cam Johnson getting drafted 11th overall. A lot of NBA players can make it out after that, but there are no guarantees after the first round. So that is the concern. He needs to put a lot of work in.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of weird, but I think not getting drafted is going to give Justin a little bit of a different mindset I think he's going to go in there and, the us against the world and chip on his shoulder. You hear all that all the time. But I think that will really be the case with him. I think he's probably disappointed and upset he wasn't drafted. And I think that'll translate, not that he wasn't going to work hard to begin with, but I think this might ramp him up a little bit. And, I think couldn't find a better fit, I don't think, than Toronto.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great fit. I think it will motivate him. Of course, financially, it's not as much of a benefit as he would have liked right now, and that was part of him going. Him and his family do need that. It's not a situation where they were treated with a silver spoon. So that's something that he definitely wants to strive for, to get where TJ McConnell is, to get that contract. I think there could be a fit for him in the NBA. But you also got to think that I would imagine that if Miles McBride was told he'd be a second-round pick and not a first-round pick, or if Champagnie was told he wouldn't be drafted, maybe they wouldn't have came out. But they're there now. I think they have chances. I think Champagnie certainly has a perfect fit for him. And again, it's all about, for those type of players, hitting shots, hitting outside shots, and being able to be that spark plug if they call you off the bench and you're cold for 3 hours, still hitting a shot. So it's tougher to do that than it sounds. It's certainly easier said than done. But if he can do that, he can have a long career. McConnell's been able to do it. Other players like that have been able to do it. So maybe he can be that type of guy. That'll do it for this edition of the show. We'll try to do a few more of these this week, but I also am going to be going to Canton. So we'll see what we can do. Of course, a lot more with Steelers training camp. We'll be hearing from Haskins in particular. We haven't heard from really. We'll try to get a video up about that. And of course, hit up all our sites with the rest of our coverage, as college football news never really sleeps. Even some news about possible ACC teams calling the SEC, and if that's really true or not, and if there's any validity there with Clemson and company trying to get out. I don't think as true as what's already happened in the Big 12, but people are making phone calls. They're doing those cold calls, and we'll see what happens moving forward. For Mike Vakovican, I'm Mike Osti. For all of us here at Pittsburgh Sports Live and PSN, and thanks again, of course, to Doug Martin at Martin Lawn Services.